and welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. The show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how not to do crazy stupid stuff, but instead to do smart, meaningful stuff, which is really what we all want to do in marketing, but we get caught up in all of these other things that distract us from doing that. And today we are talking about insights, not just any old insights, but ruthless insights. We're going to explain to you what that is in just a minute. But I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think in marketing in particular, and I'm sure I've said this on this show so many times. So if you're a regular, you've probably heard me say this before, but there's a lot of data that can be captured from a marketing perspective. There's some of it that's useful, but there's a lot of it that's not. And so when we're collecting data and we're using that data to generate insights, which I mean, honestly, you should be doing, even though I don't like to say should, because if you're going to collect data, you should do something with it instead of just like collect it just for the fun of it. What are we doing with those insights? And are we being ruthless with the insights we're creating in order for them to actually contribute meaningfully for our business? So if you are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. We are super excited to have you here. If you are joining us for not the first time, welcome to the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. We're always excited to see you again. And while, if you're watching on the video, this might look like a conversation for two people, this is actually a conversation for all of us. Because believe it or not, you have your own experience with insights that may or may not be empowering you right now. And this is your opportunity to get into the conversation and share. What are the things you've experienced in the insights arena that were empowering, that did help you? What are the things that you experienced that maybe didn't help so much? Where are you experiencing data, but maybe not insights? All of the things. We encourage you to bring your questions, comments, perspectives, insights, knowledge into the conversation so that we can all have the most robust conversation we can have today. Angel, always great to see you. Yes, we love this collab too. Just in case you were wondering, you're not the only one. We've been sitting on it for a while, though, folks. Yeah, so, like, this has been in the hopper for a minute. So let's learn a little bit more about our guest, Filip. Filip, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up focusing on ruthless insights.
Well, let's start with the first portion of your question. My name is Filip. I'm originally from Croatia, moved to Canada 9 years ago. And I am a sociologist by education. So that being said, I was always interested in human beings and their behavior and why they do the things they do. So that's kind of what brought me into research, because kind of in sociology, it seems to me like you have two major directions you can go. One is more of a teaching type of stuff, which is amazing. And the other one is research. So I kind of wanted to do both. Teaching didn't really work for me at that particular time in the academia in Croatia, and neither did research, but I kind of saw the opportunity there because I was always pretty good at research methodology and always understood how to do these things just naturally, just my kind of natural inclination. So I started doing different types of research. When was the first one was 2008. So that kind of dates me a little bit, but it's 2012 and I'm still doing
your experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2012 and I'm still doing the same thing, even though I'm more fortunate these days to be focused. I'm still doing research, don't get me wrong, but I'm more focused on like strategic research projects, as well as like mentoring younger researchers, research ops and so on, which is something, so I finally can be teaching now. So which is something that really
all came back around.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of something that fills me with joy. It truly does. My main motivation for research, because I started in the not-for-profit and then I went into academia and now I'm in business. Now, the problem with non-for-profit and in academia is if you're motivated, my primary motivation was to help people, and always it still is. Like I want to make some kind of positive change in the world around me. And I'm doing that by providing insights, helpful insights to businesses. obviously, and not for profit and academia, one would expect, like, oh, well, not for profit, you're going to change lives. Turns out both not for profit and academia tend to be a little bit too slow for my taste. Business
Mm.
is way faster. And you know what? If I can provide insights which helps a business person bring food to their family's table, so I change someone's life, something. And if they make a good product that makes people's lives easier, and I participated in that, well, there's another change. So my ideal position is to exist between these two changes, right? Existing between those wins. Yeah, hope I phrased that correctly. And when it comes to ruthlessness, that was not my idea. So being ruthless and naming my company Ruthless Insights was actually my client's idea. 'Cause again, I am from Eastern Europe, and my personal belief is that, like, I believe in truth above all. I'm very scientifically oriented. I don't do any of non-scientific or pseudoscientific stuff. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in proof, very hard evidence, proof, and so on. So when I'm delivering, and again, I'm Eastern European, so I say what I mean and I mean what I say, and that's how I used to deliver insights. And even though I was right, I didn't really deliver them in a way that would be very receptive to the North American culture.
Mm.
So my client told me that I was ruthless and that I should rename my company Ruthless Insights. And that's exactly what I did because I loved it. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of personal branding that happened in that, so I love it. Um, okay, so let's talk about this need for ruthless insights. Because
Sure.
again, I think specifically in marketing, there's a lot of people collecting a lot of data. A lot of people will consider themselves data driven marketers. I think the whole tagline is like, you see it on a lot of LinkedIn profiles. But like, what does it really mean to reach that level of truth, to reach that
Mhm.
level of ruthlessness, and also be able to like maybe let go of what makes it feel so ruthless.
Yeah, I don't think you should, and I'm going to start from the back this time.
Okay.
I don't think you should. I think that ruthlessness, and people might dislike me for this, but I don't necessarily care because I think I'm right. I think that, and it's the same way I like receiving feedback in my personal life and in my professional life. Just tell me what's up, and if it hurts me, that might even be better because it means two things. It means one, it hurt me because I care, and second, because it hurt me, I actually remembered it and I took it to
Mm,
heart. So, in my personal life, like I'm heavily into martial arts and fitness and whatnot, I don't shy away from the pain, and I don't think neither should entrepreneurs. I think they should actually actively embrace it so they can learn from it. Because my intention when I'm delivering insights, no matter how ruthless I am, is never to hurt them.
right.
It's to save them money. It's to reduce the risk. That's my insight. And if I tell you, I'm using a comedic. So I went to a comedy show and the guy was talking about entrepreneurial ideas and mentioned selling inflatable penguins online. So I'm using this as an example. If your idea is to sell inflatable penguins online, and if I come in and I do research and I tell you, listen, there's really nothing here. There's nothing here. I need to tell you exactly those words,
Mm,
no matter if they hurt you or not, because that's my job.
mm,
So that's one thing. And second thing, I think we should, but also you can't escape a perceived ruthlessness because now that you know I have good intentions, am I really ruthless, or am I just being uh, a good hire, good client, employee, whatever you want to say, good researcher? I don't know, but what I was trying to say is like if I'm here to protect my client, and
mhm.
I'm here to inform my client. So if that comes across as rootless, so be it.
I think this is interesting too, just from like a human state of being, as like with
Yeah,
where our economy and our society have gotten to these days, where like a lot of things have become about comfort. There's a lot of things that we can do so that, like, hey, cars, I mean, in essence, the way a car works has been pretty much the same for a long time. The function isn't where people focus anymore. It's the comfort, the features. Even, I mean, in like pretty much everything, right? This is why Amazon is so popular, because it's just made it easier, more comfortable for me to shop to get the things that I need.
For sure.
And there's a lot of comfort. And I actually think that that has put us into a scenario where we've forgotten the value of actually getting the data and saying, like, yeah, this is true. Might not be comfortable, but it is true.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And that brings us to the second part of my answer, which I forgot because I kind of got tangled up in my own rhetoric there. But what I wanted to say is you mentioned data and how to be driven by data. So there are actually two types of data that you can collect as a marketer. Even though Ruthless focuses on kind of two major branches of research, UX or user experience research, product research, however you want to call it, and market research, right? One researches products or systems and their users, other one researchers usually like either services or products, but they're consumers. They're very similar.
Right.
But you can collect primary or secondary data. Primary data is, and that's what Rootless mostly does. It's going and actually either observing human beings or talking to them in a different way, whether that's through surveys, interviews, diary studies, observing their behavior through usability testing and whatnot. And that's primary data. You do that when other data isn't available.
Mm-hmm.
Bad part of that story is that usually data for your particular product is not available. So you got to go with the primary research, right? But the good part of that story is, as you said, like collecting data. Let's start collecting data. I would always encourage people to start collecting some data, because the problem that I find coming into the client, especially the ones that have products that are already done, is that they never even started collecting data. So that would be the first very easy step. Start collecting data and then cooperate with someone like myself, because people like myself can determine, okay, what are your business goals? What kind of metrics we can put together to synchronize business goals versus user goals? By the way, they can be very opposite a lot of times. So we need to figure out what we are going to track. We call these things signals, which signals we are going to track. Signals define our metrics. And then we say, okay, you know what? 6 months down the road or 3 months down the road, we're going to sit down and we'll see how these metrics behave. Now, once we track those metrics and that data is available, it's still primary data because we collected it, but it can also be considered secondary data, right? Because it's kind of tracking. We didn't make the data, but just by kind of going and talking to people, right? And there's also other part of secondary data, which is the data that's available online. For example, how many people, I'm going to use the example of inflatable penguins because it's so ridiculous. How many people Google anything related to inflatable penguins online, right? Where do these people come from? What are their traits? What are their demographics and stuff like that? These are all helpful data that make you maybe piece together at least one part of the puzzle, right? So when we plan out the data, we need to figure out, okay, this is what we want to do. These are my business goals. And these are the data at particular steps of this journey that I need to make an informed decision. So how can you help me get that data? And this is where Ruthless really shines. And like really getting into the weed of things, the business, working together with the business owner, saying, okay, this is where we step in, this is where we step in, this is where we step in, this is where we track along the way. And that's how you make better decisions. Mind you, business is always risky. Research just makes it a little bit less risky. Not a little. I mean, I would say in a significant way less risky, depending on the research, though.
And how well it's done. Yeah, that makes tons of sense. I want to share the other Filip that is in the chat. One saying that Filip was written the right way. So good job spelling your name the same, you guys. And as the epic song says, ruthlessness is mercy upon ourselves. This is a good way to look at it for sake of this conversation.
For sure.
Coming back to that, like this, idea of defining the metrics for your organization, because I feel
Mhm.
like, again, this is an area where I feel like a lot of businesses are being told what to track. So whether they've like read something on the internet or a book, or they're copying another business model or what have you, they kind of have these like external inputs of what they think they should quote unquote track.
Mhm.
Um, and so what are some of the challenges you've seen with that? And what are some of the things you've experienced that happen when people are tracking the right things, being that's the
Mm.
right thing specifically for their business?
Okay, so now I'm going to tell you two examples. I won't mention any company names because I signed NDAs. But the first one is great because these are the typical situations in which I lose my mind in a bad way. And that's something that applies to even bigger, way bigger companies than I tend to work with. Somebody somewhere told them they should track NPS, and
I am really excited to hear this example
and
because I've been in a bunch of these conversations lately.
look, I'm not saying NPS is inherently good nor bad. But it's almost like saying, and again, I might get crucified on the internet for this, but again, I stopped caring a long time ago. NPS is a measure that, if I'm not wrong, and I read about that some time ago, so don't take my word for it. It developed from a restaurant industry, from the hospitality industry, and it actually asks a proxy question, right? What is the likelihood that you would recommend this? And then you have this meme online in which I think researchers from Microsoft or somewhere asked, like, how likely are you to recommend Windows operating system to a friend or a colleague? And then you have a comment, I need you to understand that people don't have random conversations in which they recommend operating systems to each other,
Mm,
which is great, right? It's like, okay, what does that tell us about what we really want to know?
right.
As a proxy measure of customer satisfaction, NPS is only good in certain scenarios,
Mm,
right? And again, keep in mind it's a proxy measure. So a lot of businesses will use that, and they'll combine it with other questions, such as like, okay, you are in this category, tell me why, tell me more about that, or tell me how satisfied are you with these particular variables which might account for certain services that I provide, or certain aspects of services that I provide. And that's when we get a little bit better than just asking that one question. And you'll also see that some of the bigger companies just use NPS because it's good enough.
mm,
Well, while it might be, I mean, almost anything can be good enough for you if you romanticize it, right? Like
right.
that's, I mean, you can have a partner that's not really right for you, but you kind of romanticize it and think it's good enough. But in my personal opinion, NPS is usually not, right. It's
Mm,
simple. It's simple to deploy. It's simple to analyze. Non-researchers can do it relatively precisely, which makes it very usable. But it's, again, almost like using a hammer to screw a screw. It's not really the right thing. You'll get it done, right?
right.
It's not really the right thing. So there are better metrics like usability metrics out there and whatnot, but I am a big believer in shaping our own metrics. Just hire a researcher who knows what they're doing and sit down and talk about business goals. Why that's important? Because your business goals should be directly correlated to your metrics. So your metrics should tell you something that you need to know in order to be better. So, and that's not a hard concept to grasp, but a lot of people don't know, like, Jesus, how do I do it? Right.
Right.
Well, and that's why I spoke about user or customer goals. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing, users or customers. And second thing is our business goals, right? Like, let's say you mentioned, I'm not going to mention inflatable pigments anymore. Let's use your example of a car. Like, my goal as a driver, a customer of a car that I bought was obviously, I don't know, safety, mileage, price. Of course, I want to get the best deal. Well, this is where price, for example, is one of the prime cases in which user goals and business goals are directly opposite, right? I
Mm,
want to get the best product for the least amount of money, and the business wants the most money for the least possible effort, right? So they want
Right.
to deploy, which is which is something you need to take into account as you're shaping these metrics. So it's like, oh, okay, like how do we view price? Do we have more nuance about pricing? Do we understand why? So sitting down and really figuring out what are these goals, understanding users and the business will put you in the right spot to define these. First define metrics, then define how we're going to measure them, and then tracking or deploying research instruments to measure these metrics.
Mhm.
And then a few months down the road, you have your results and you're way smarter than you were 3 months ago.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think this is the interesting thing too, because there is a balance between like meaning and ease, right? If something seems too difficult, then people won't do it. And it is one of the reasons why NPS is very common, is that like I can ask you one question, anybody can build that on SurveyMonkey, and I can just send it out to you. But also, like from my perspective, one of the things I'm always looking like is how does that match your brand experience? Because if now I'm trying to create a brand experience for high net worth individuals and I'm sending out just a one question NPS survey, it doesn't really match my brand or my target audience. So specifically, if I'm trying to collect first party data, like I'm potentially breaking my brand experience with it.
100%. And it's not only that, it's also how it biases your sample.
Right.
Like, that's also something we need to think about. If someone's idea of research is, oh, I'm just going to send this 3 question qualitative survey, well, think about who are the people, and you have, I don't know, 1 million people. And who are those people that are more inclined to answer? Mo- Very similar to like reviews, right? It's either people that are really disappointed, disgruntled with the experience, or high supporters.
Right.
But you don't necessarily need any of those. You kind of, it seems to me like you want something that's in between. Sure, you want to tackle the bigger problems. If like you're getting bad reviews and there's this one part of the experience that's terrible, or a
Right.
product that's terrible, of course you want to tackle that. But that's usually, especially with established products and services, you usually don't have those.
Mhm.
But you have this middle that is usually won't respond to the NPS survey. And even if they did respond to that one question, even if they did, like even if they said, I would recommend this product, what does that tell you? Except for that they're, for whatever reason, delighted with your product, right? It
Right.
doesn't tell you much. It doesn't give you much to improve on as a measure.
Mhm.
Because I was actually talking about it recently. Um, People, you can have the worst car in the world, but if there are no other cars around, people will be delighted with your
Right.
product.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean your product's good.
Right.
Okay, it also means that you have a lot of room to improve.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to say is we need more depth. If you want to understand, if you want to improve, you need more depth. And in order to get that depth, you need unbiased, structured approach to insights.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, there's so much good stuff. So, something that came up for me while you were sharing that was this concept of, because one of the things I do know about NPS isn't just supposed to be a metric. There's like an operational component that is supposed to include follow up, different urgency levels with different levels of like feedback and these types of things. And so, when you look at research from a holistic point of view, I feel like this is really like a whole business investment. It's not like just a user research survey, which might be more of a like operations product management type thing. It's not just like market research, which might be associated with like just the marketing team. It really is about like the business and how the business is using research to meet its business goals. Yay,
That's
nay, more details, more nuances.
yeah, that's exactly how I see it. It actually, you know what boggles my mind, Tracy? The amount of entrepreneurs I talk to who are ready, or businesses, entrepreneurs, who are ready to invest so much money into things based on a hunch.
Mhm.
And it's mind-boggling because because I wouldn't. And sure, I'm biased. I'm a researcher. I'm biased, but I know the value of the data. I know the value of the insights that I'm providing to businesses. So it's really weird for me when businesses are kind of like, yeah, you know what, we're 100K into this project, 200K into this project, and they haven't done one research project, nothing,
Mm.
not even a high level discovery research, nothing. They just went for it head first, which I admire the bravery behind it, but it's also not the smartest way to do it.
Mm.
Uh, so that to answer your question directly or to comment on what you said, I think that research should be just a regular step in every business.
Mm.
You open your business, you think of a name, you have logo created, you open your website, you open your LinkedIn profile, you tell everyone on LinkedIn how brave you are and you're going into it, or hey, we're developing this new feature, or in a big company it works a little bit different. Hey, we're developing this new feature, we want to get together, we're developing this app or a service and we really want to go ahead with it. We all shake hands and we're happy. That's our plan for 2025. That the same so it should be routine. That's what I'm trying to say. Research should be a
Mm.
routine step in every product or service development, and it should be done on a regular basis. And sure, I know some people listening might think, of course he's saying that he's trying to sell his services, which is partially true, but I'm also not trying to sell something that doesn't work. That's the deal. So it's like um and don't get me wrong, there are entrepreneurs out there that I've seen that have done zero research, yet they launch a great product
Right.
or a service. They made tons of money. Sure. And there's a UX person online that I'm following. Her name is Nikki Anderson, and I love her articles and whatnot. And she said once that not using research is like aiming at a dartboard with a blindfold on.
Mhm.
There's a chance you still might hit it. You still might hit the bullseye, right?
Yeah.
But doing research is taking that blindfold off. And that's a great analogy because now I'm still aiming at the dartboard, but now I can see the board and I
Right.
can see where it is and I can see where I'm standing if I'm even facing in the right direction. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the analogy that I'm using, and I think it's valuable. Kind of lost my train of thought, but I think I covered everything.
Yeah. Well, I think the point here is that I do think a lot of times people will look at research as like a project based thing, right? It's like, so I'm looking at entering a new market. Maybe I'll do research for that. I want to do an NPS. So I keep that kind of like in a bucket. But this concept of having it being just part of your business routine, I think is a different perspective than most people are treating research right now. So it's important for people to realize that that is an option.
Absolutely. It is an option, but yeah, and that's, I mean, since we're talking about it, cost is a prohibitive factor to this. And that's something that I wanted to tackle with Ruthless. I was like, okay, what happens if I actually, because right now as a business, you kind of have three options. You can hire someone full time, which is obviously costly. You don't know who you're hiring and whatnot. Second, you can hire a freelancer and then you have a credibility issue. Or three, you can hire a big box agency. And there is a high chance that all of them are going to do a great job. But if you're going to hire an agency, if you can't really afford someone to come in and work for you full time, you're facing a cost factor. They're big for a reason.
Mhm.
They're most likely great at what they do, but they also charge a lot of money.
Right.
So you can't really afford. A lot of entrepreneurs don't go in it because they don't think they can afford it. So what I
Mhm.
wanted to do is not be cost prohibitive. I wanted to be the one that's going to kind of get in the middle of that story and help people do research with a credible company with competent researchers, but for an acceptable price, so they can do it often. And yeah, that's the advantage that I wanted to bring into the world. So yeah, so that the businesses can do that research.
Well, and it's interesting though too because I mean, like, I actually studied market research in school, so
Oh,
it's
sweet.
like
Yes.
brings me back to the days.
Right.
Um, but like, I mean, personally, I have experiences with NPS, and again, like, I don't think NPS is bad, but there's like so many people also who do research from the benefit like it, I mean, like, I'm sure there's some kind of expiry date on specific research, but that, like, you do the research, you get your NPS benchmark, it's a benchmark, and then, like, that's it, right? Like, I just wanted to figure out my benchmark, and, like, I'm above average in my industry, so now I'm good to go.
Yeah.
That we could probably do more with that. And even when people are thinking about it from that perspective, like if that's something that you've done before and you put X amount of budget into doing that and you looked at the like business value that was generated from that budget, what else could we do with that budget? And this is where people like Filip are really awesome, because you could be like, okay, well, I've got this kind of budget. I really want to create meaningful insights, collect meaningful data
Mhm.
in a recurring way. What could that look like? And again, it's going to look different for different businesses. So being able to have somebody that you can have that conversation with and just like ideate what could research actually do for our business. It was just handy to have those people in your
Yeah,
pocket.
yeah. What 100%. And again, I mean, in research circles nowadays, it's very modern to say bad things about MPS. And again, I'm not really saying MPS is good or bad by itself. I
Mhm,
just think that it's not being used properly.
mhm,
That's all I'm saying. And right, I mean, if you're especially because you'll get people within the company who are expected to do job of a researcher, and they're simply
right.
not equipped to do that, and it's not their
Mm,
fault. They're trying their best.
mhm,
You get to see this in marketing, for example. You have super smart people that are great at marketing, but they're simply not researchers, and that's great. They're expected to do research, and then they do MPS, and I've seen examples when it's not done badly at all. It just doesn't give you the depth that business needs to work on that.
right.
The only problem that I have with these cases is that it it gives the illusion of competence, or it gives the illusion of the data that you have is a good data, right?
Mm,
And now you have the data, people are delighted with your product, but you're still losing. You're still not
right.
winning, or at least to a degree that you wanted to, and you're thinking like, what am I missing? Well,
Right.
you probably, what they say, any data is better than no data. I kind of disagree.
Mm,
I
I
think
would
that
disagree too.
you might as well get good data, because at least if you have no data, you don't have a false sense of confidence.
Right.
So that's kind of how I see it, and it's not only with marketing and MPS. You get the same thing with HR. You get HR people who are not researchers. They're doing employee satisfaction surveys,
Mhm,
and whether they copied and pasted it online or made them up themselves, you're looking at that. And me also working for different corporations, I was looking at these things. I'm like, well, it's not you guys' fault, but I'm not sure why you were tasked to do these things. So that's kind of maybe a different aspect to that problem, which I was just kind of trying to touch on here.
yeah. Okay. So, but you also touched on somewhere else I wanted to go with this as using AI as a researcher.
Ooh,
Okay. Can
yes.
we talk
Yes,
about this? Because I feel
yes.
like this is something that
Okay.
a lot of people are doing, specifically in marketing. Um, so, what are the limitations of that? What are the challenges of that? What are the benefits of
Okay, I'll be ruthless here. Okay.
that? That's what we're here to be today.
I absolutely don't think it's there yet.
Mm,
I think so. I'll tell you a different example. Personally, I'm into full contact combat sports, mixed martial arts, Brazilian jiu jitsu. And I think that's the equivalent of a kung fu. It's a great martial art for recreation, but it doesn't really give you tangible fighting skills. People will get mad again. That's fine. That's AI. So
mm,
I've so I don't, and I don't use AI in my research at all. Why? Because the way my brain works, it does more harm than good. So because there are different steps of the research. Sure, you can maybe use AI to kind of give you some ideas on how you might quote a research project. For that, it's awesome. Like, hey, this is the amount of time I spend doing these things. Please give me a quote. And it helps you with that. But when it comes to analysis and figuring out human beings, because look, my job as a researcher is to determine underlying principles that govern the behavior of human beings. so that I can provide those insights to people who will invest their hard-earned money into whatever they're making.
Right.
So, and I did an experiment. I did the research and analysis myself, and then I used 3 AI tools to do the same thing for me. The research was, the difference was huge, so much so that I've never used any AI tool again. And that was about 6 months ago or 10 months ago. So things might have changed, granted. And I actually had an interesting conversation today, and I'm ready to try. I'm ready to have my mind change. But the problem is, where good research thrives is in the nuance, especially qualitative research. Uh, like how people say the things that they're saying. So you can't really take stuff at a face value. If you're doing pseudo experiments like user testing and seeing how people are using their products, you need to combine their actions with things like their facial expressions or sounds they're making. And you, as a human being, are so far the only machine equipped enough to go through these experiences in a systematic way and then delivering insights from them. And that's where a good researcher truly shines. Now, where AI can be useful is like mundane tasks. Hey, what is the time to complete this assignment? Right? Or even with quantitative analysis, I find it more helpful than with interviews and whatnot. So far, I think AI is doing more harm than good. I don't trust it because I did experiments and it wasn't good enough. And if I am making recommendations to the business based on which they'll invest money, I want to be able to stand behind those
Mhm.
insights. So far, I'm not really in it.
So, like, let's talk about this though, because we know that, like, one of the things that AI has is it's like, I mean, it is also biased. So I'm not going to say it's
Oh,
not
for sure.
biased, but like, it has a larger data set than a human brain. So when I am like observing nuances, if I'm looking at like myself as a researcher, if I'm observing nuances and making interpretations based on that from an insight perspective, is there things that I should be like looking at, like kind of pressure testing of my own? Because again, every human has bias. And so avoid how do we avoid the bias
Ooh,
in our research?
that's a loaded question. I know we only have 45 minutes, but not going to talk to for 7 more minutes. There are many ways that you can avoid biases. That's part of the talk that I had at Calgary Tech Talks was
Mhm.
about how do we avoid bias. Uh, so I'm going to talk about, yeah, sure. Human beings are definitely biased. But if you know, hey, I am a human being and I'm biased, and researchers are trained with it in it. And if you know that, you look at your data in a different way.
Mm.
Plus, there are systems in place. For example, grounded theory is a system that we use to analyze, and I'm just talking about qualitative data right now, to analyze the data in such a way that we stay close to the data. So basically, what you're doing is reading and rereading transcripts until you're and rewatching videos, a very tedious process in which you're really trying to figure out whether it's something that you interpreted as something or is it something that's
Mm.
still up in the air and you really need to be honest with yourself. uh, so for sure we are biased, but we also know that we're biased. Robot does not, which again makes it a little bit more dangerous. So that's one thing. Second thing, which you mentioned, like how to avoid bias. One is sampling, appropriateness of the sample, and I always talk about this. It's like, hey, how many people have you talked to? Did you talk to 100 people? That really depends on what you're trying to figure out in what way. But more importantly than that is the appropriateness of the sample. Are those the
Mm.
right people to talk to? Okay. And also like how you made your generalizations. Are you generalizing to theory or the principles? And but that's like, okay, who am I talking to? That, like we talked about MPS, right? Who are the like how is your sample bias? Who are most likely to answer your 5 minute survey? Your supporters and people who hate you, right?
Yeah.
So how is your sample bias? So that's the appropriateness of sample is one. A second is the instrument, or we call it the research situation, which is a situation in which a person is participating in the research, whether that person is filling up the survey, whether that person is answering your questions at an interview, or if you're watching their recording as they're using your app.
Mm.
Right? So you need to take all of these things into account as I'm constructing a research process, so that the insights that I deliver can be as precise and as well insightful as possible.
Yeah, I think again, like this is just important to do because I feel like so often we just get to the point where people are like, send out a survey, send out a survey. And whether that, I mean, from an employee survey point of view, I have filled out one too many meaningless employee surveys, right? I
Yeah.
also filled out, because my background is in market research, I do all surveys. Like
Mhm.
my husband thinks I'm ridiculous because I will do the grocery store survey. I do like all of the surveys, mostly because I'm curious about the questions that they're asking more so than my answers, because there's a lot of really bad questions out there that help people not collect good data. But we treat this as like so simple, right? Like I'm just going to send out a survey
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that's it, right. Like and like the answer is in the sending out of the survey. And I mean, you can do that. Lots of people will do that. Lots of people will also not get meaningful insights from
Yeah.
doing that. So, again, I think it's what we've revealed here today is a bunch of things where, like, we need to peel back these layers. Like, get back to the why of this. Why are we doing research? Because if we're going to bother doing research, let's do meaningful research. And especially if like, and I always think this too, if we are surveying customers, I want this to add value to the customer, right? I want them to go through this experience and know that like I created an experience for them that improves or maintains their current brand experience instead of just like,
Mhm.
ah, yep, someone,
Yeah.
I think this is
Service slapping. Yeah, I saw the
survey
comment.
clapping.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Love the
let's
comment.
not. And one of the things I also say is that, like, if you're not going to use the data you collect, then you might as well not collect the data, especially if it's from your customers.
Bingo.
Because if I collect the data, people are going to expect me to use the data. So let's talk about that for a minute, Filip, in terms of like, how do we ensure that we have the underlying structure or intention to use the data before we go out and just survey slap somebody.
So first, I'll say that survey is only one of the many instruments we can use.
Right.
It's just a form of the interview. But let me talk about one thing: is that using the data. Prime example, because in Ruthless Insights we have a service, we call it Satisfact, which is employee satisfaction done right. It's done by researchers, and we actually do it's a mixed methods research, so a company gets a really in-depth approach. And why did I do that? Because I was frustrated by because I was working for different corporations. You get this employee satisfaction survey, and you fill it out, and you also talk to your coworkers, and we all agree on things, and you know what the truth is. And the company goes public with the data. Well, sometimes they don't, and they do nothing. And you're looking at that, and you're super frustrated. Well,
Mhm.
for users, because they don't have the same level of involvement, the frustration is a little bit less. But I know exactly what you're saying. Research instrument, research outreach is part of your overall customer experience.
Mhm.
So if I'm reaching out to the user at like under a company name and asking them to do a survey, if that survey is subpar, if no changes are being made, then they will be less motivated to do it again, which is a problem because you'll have to do research multiple times if you want to be customer centric, which is something that everybody throws around these days, but nobody's
Yeah.
really, I mean, not saying nobody, that's a lie. A lot of companies are, but a lot of companies are not customer centric. They don't understand what it means.
Right.
If you really want to be customer centric, you want to treat your users, customers, research participants, especially if those are the same people, you want to treat them properly, which means, look, if you ask me for 5 minutes of my time or 10 minutes of my time, and I gave you my time and my focus, you do nothing, then it's, if I'm less motivated to do it the next time, that's kind of understandable, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, but I also think a lot of companies, that's something I face. That's one of the major frustrations of all UXers, not just me, that I talk to, are companies or clients that are like, yeah, we want to do research. We want you to help us make this great product. And then you as a researcher become emotionally invested. Like, for example, I was working on app to help adults with ADHD. Like, this is amazing, right? I get to help people. This is great. So you kind of work on it and then nothing happens.
Mm.
No, like they, or an entrepreneur is just stubborn and they want to do what they wanted to do in the first place.
Right.
Or they just take parts, which is most often they just take parts of the research that kind of conforms with what they already were thinking.
Mm.
And they're like, okay, I knew I was right. Right. And yeah, but that's the problem with any research in any sphere. So
Right. Okay, last question. I don't want to use the word bribe, but how do you feel about, or do you use strategies as like gifting people? Do people get paid for their time? Like, what are some of the most successful ways? If we're looking at this from like a brand experience point of view, I want to collect data from my customers or my users. Should I always be thinking about rewarding them? What is your experience in like people's ability to share their data?
Mhm. So there's been research on that, actually. Research on the effectiveness of incentives
Mm.
for research. And believe it or not, people just want to be fairly compensated for their time. I'm oversimplifying research results. So once you get up to a certain point, I think that was what, 10 years ago that I've read that research, but up to, I think it was $40 for half an hour of their time. Uh, and we're talking about gen pops, or general population, not business to business. That's a little bit of a different story. But people are motivated to help, so that's their primary motivation. So let me tell you my experience. So I was doing research for what's now Uncover Me, which is a game for adults, for like adult game for couples. But before it was Naughty Nights, which was more of a kind of adult role playing type of sexually oriented game. So I was trying to figure out like how are people engaging into sexual role play. I didn't know anything about it, and didn't have enough money attached to it. So I just asked people like, "Hey, can you guys help me out? I'm really trying to understand what you guys are doing, because we're trying to make something that would help you or maybe enhance your experience. So it kind of help me help you type of
Right.
thing." And I had enough participants, no problem,
Mhm.
because people were motivated with that.
Mhm.
Another research, when I was doing market research for Yukon residents, I just published on their Reddit. I asked the moderator, I was like, "Hey, man, we're trying to maybe do something for the economy here in Yukon, and I'm trying to build a survey and get people in." And I had enough participants because
Mhm.
people were motivated to help. No
Right.
compensation whatsoever. In business to business, you need to offer more money. People are not as motivated. But then again, money only works to a certain point.
Right.
Until it doesn't, until a lot of money works for everyone,
Right.
right? If
You
you
want to
offer,
pay me $1 million? I'll
that's
do whatever
exactly it.
survey you want.
If you want $5 million for 30 minutes of your time, you can get Elon Musk to participate, most likely,
Right.
right? You know what I mean? So, but again, and again, as a researcher, you kind of need to play with these things, understand them better, and work based off of that. Yeah, that's what I'm
Right.
saying.
And so, like, just because I know there are some people who might be watching this show who work with high net worth individuals. So it's interesting for me because I also feel like this group of people is very, like, they like to give back, especially to brands that are like they are a fan of. And so, like, do you have any specific insights for us on like incentivizing high net worth individuals? Maybe not Elon Musk, but like others, and not Donald Trump either.
I don't like it. It's very project specific.
Mm.
That's researchers' favorite phrase is "it depends." So I really don't. It seems to me like offering maybe um, 2 or 3 times the minimum wage could be like, okay, what's the minimum wage? $15 an hour. So for Gen Pop, if I offered you 3 times as much for an hour of your time, would you be willing to participate? A lot of people will say yes, right?
Right.
So that's almost like asking them, hey, would you like to work overtime for an hour? My guideline would be just be ethical with it. Like, think about it. These people are giving you their time and energy, and they're taking away that time and energy from all the things that are maybe more important to them. So you
Right.
need to be aware of that, respect them. That's ethical research. So it's not really bribing, it's just being ethical, respecting their time. If you can, and if not, just being upfront with it. Look, usually it's compensated. I can't compensate you because we don't have money, but can you please do me a favor? That's
Right.
also just like, yeah, just being human.
Yeah. Well, and I think that again, like I'm seeing a balance here, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially in the small business entrepreneurship arena, might be inclined to use their friends from a
Mhm.
research perspective. But then there's also, because their friends will do that for free, like I'll give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes of my time because you're my friend. Yeah, sure. But am I an appropriate sample?
That's
Right.
exactly it.
So then you got to we got to come back to appropriateness. We got to balance that with who is motivated to help. But I think these are two really great foundations for us to look at in terms of our sampling, is that what is appropriate based on my business outcomes and also like what I'm trying to achieve in terms of a brand experience, and who's motivated to help. And like if there's people who check both of those boxes, then let's go talk to those people because they'll probably be the easy yeses.
Yeah, but that brings us to a whole nother can of worms, and that's recruiting and research, which is the major stumbling block for a variety of reasons, and I'm sure we don't have time to talk about them today.
We for sure don't. Oh man, this is what we love to do on this show, is open cans of worms. But I think what we've demonstrated here today, folks, is that Filip is a great person to open these research can of worms with. And so, Filip, if people are wanting to continue the conversation or would like to learn more about Ruthless Insights and what you guys do, where is the best place for people to find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn, or they can just go to ruthlessinsights.com. That's our website. Our email is there, but if you want to send a direct email, it's easy. It's hello@ruthlessinsights.com. So easy to remember. That's it. If you need my 2 cents on the product service you're doing, feel free.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, Filip. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for bringing some ruthlessness to us and our insights in a good way, not in a mean, nasty way, but in a good way where we make them meaningful. I think we have a lot of really great insights for everybody today and things they can take away and try new things. I want to also say thank you to our wonderful chatters in the comments today, Evangel, Filip, the other Filip, Tim, and Akim, whose name is not showing up for whatever reason, but I see that it's you. Thank you. Also, survey slapping. I'm now just going to add it to my vocabulary. I'm very excited about that. And so thank you guys for getting into the conversation. It definitely added additional value. We always appreciate all of the voices when you guys are ready to share. So with that, Filip, thank you again for all your wonderful insights. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.